Good morning and welcome to the last of 6 webinars showing the saltwater opportunities in the magnificent Pacific Ocean in our backyards. In this, the second series of talks, we'll be looking at small craft opportunities in our local bays and inlets. And today, our presenter is Graham Day. But first, a word of thanks to our host, the Southwest Council of Fly Fishers International, for creating this series and promoting the webinar. Let's also thank Snowbee USA, our sponsors for this series of SoCal fly fishing opportunities in the salt. They carry a lot of gear to be used for this type of fishing. They've also generously donated 2 $75 gift certificates, a stripping basket, and a large saltwater fly wallet to keep your flies handy. And as a bonus, Graham Day has kindly donated a guided day on the water, and more details will be available at the end of the talk today. First, a little housekeeping. This is a webinar, not a regular Zoom meeting. I'm sure many of you will have questions, and you can type these in the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. There'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. If you're new to Zoom, at the top right is a button that can change your view. We recommend gallery view, and you can also adjust the side-to-side size of the presentation with your cursor. One last item before we get to the show. If you go to the Council's website, which is listed on the screen, and click the donation button and donate $5 or more, you will be entered in a drawing to win a bunch of stuff. It's a very, very worthwhile thing to do. The drawing will be held on Facebook Live on April the 28th at 6 p.m. The winner does not need to be present to win, and you'll be notified by email. All the net proceeds are going to the Southwest Council's youth program, and I think we all agree that's a great use of the funds. So today's presenter, Graham P. Day, is a Southern California inshore guide, Scout Inflatables pro staff, who has a passion for fly fishing. His DIY exploration of local saltwater fisheries began in his teenage years and has fueled his creativity ever since. Today, Graham will discuss the possibilities unlocked by fly fishing from personal watercraft, how to set up your existing gear while expanding on the range of possibilities made accessible by use of personal watercraft. This overview of tools and outfitting techniques is aimed at helping you make the most of our bays and nearshore waters. So welcome, Graham, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Marshall. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you to the council and everybody that made this happen. So talking today, I'm assuming that everybody who's attending or watching this at this point, you've had some experience fly fishing. You kind of know what to do there. So the purpose of what I want to tell you about today is kind of just how to build on that. A lot of us think that, you got to drive 3-4 hours to go up to the Eastern Sierras, or you might need to go to some far off destination to get your fix. But what a lot of guys don't realize is, within spitting distance of your backyard, even if you live an hour inland, you've got a great fishery. And you might even already have equipment to make, start making the most of saltwater fly fishing in the bays or some of the inshore waters here in Southern California. So yeah, we're going to cut into it. Part of the things I love about saltwater fly fishing, I love how easy, at least for me, I live 30 minutes from the beach, just a little bit inland, and within an hour's time, I can leave my house, be set up, and be kicking out on the water to where I get a mixed bag of species. The other thing I love about personal watercraft is it's extremely easy to transport. It's really easy to store, and it's really easy to maintain. And this comes from, my background. I've grown up here, and, for the most part, I grew up on the water, and, I grew up on boats. So, I've owned several boats, hard fiberglass hulls, things that are trailerable and, personal watercraft is just so easy because the other thing about me is I'm very spontaneous in my approach, and I can decide when I get up in the morning or before I go to bed at night if I'm going to go out, you know, because of how light I can travel and how flexible I can be with personal watercraft. You know, I can make a decision on the fly, and no pun intended, and, you know, get out on the water and start having some fun. One of the other things that I love about it, this picture shows quite well, is you know, I don't drive a big truck. I've got a Honda CRV, and this was a day where me and a couple of my buddies just decided to go down and fish Mission Bay. You see a Prius on the left there. You've got my car on the right, and then another car just down from that. And you look at and see what we're setting up and unloading. And this isn't from a launch ramp. This is just like off a beach at a public park down just down by Dana Landing.
Hey, Graham, you missed the really fun part, which is showing how to inflate this thing in the first place. I take it you don't do it with your lungs.
No. You know, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. This particular craft, when you buy a Scout, it actually comes with a foot pump, and I've timed it, and you can actually blow up the inflatable floor and both pontoons, and that part of it takes about 10 minutes. And you don't get very winded. There's a little bit of physical exertion, but I'll tell you what, at this point in the game, I carry a deep cycle marine battery with me, or an adapter that'll actually plug into the cigarette lighter in my dash. And I've got an electric pump. It takes about the same amount of time to blow up the pontoons and the floor. But the nice thing about doing that, and the reason why I've switched over from using the foot pump, is I can do other things. I can set up, I can start setting up my rod. I can start setting up my console on the boat and getting other things going while that's happening.
Great, thanks. Good answer.
Yeah. So anyways, you see here, like, ultra portable, which that's probably one of my favorite things about fly fishing, any type of personal watercraft. And I just want to go over really quick the types. There's a lot of different types of personal watercraft, but the ones I have the most experience with, are pictured here. I've done it a little bit on a stand-up paddleboard. I've been doing the float tube thing in saltwater probably since I was about 16 years old, when I got my driver's license and I could actually get down to Newport Bay. And then, you have the kayaks, which I've spent a fair amount of time using kayaks as well. And then, obviously, what you see up here in the top right is you've got the Scout Inflatables, which, in my opinion, and the reason why I love it, is it's the perfect blend between all of the other things that we're going to talk about this today and a boat. So you can get, actually, I was online earlier just looking at some friends who had shared this and shared the presentation, and one of the friends I had commented that this is the perfect balance between a kayak and a full-on boat, and it is that way for so many reasons, and we're going to talk about that today.
You have to be in really good shape to use these things.
It depends on some of them. Yeah, I'd say, for a stand-up paddleboard, you definitely need a little bit more stamina and strength. A kayak, you have to pull this thing out of the back of a car or pull it off the top of a car, and they weigh quite a bit. You just need good leg strength to use the float tube. And I'd say out of all of them, again, the Scout has the benefits of everything that you're seeing on this page, plus a boat, and it takes very, very little effort. I mean, you're dragging the boat itself, you're dragging 40 or 50 pounds. That's about it. And you're dragging it. And that kind of leads into the next question, what kind of people can fish from personal watercraft? Well, we've already covered the base where if you're attending, you're probably an angler, and you're probably a fly angler if you came to this through the Southwest Council. You might be a conventional angler tuning in today because, I did invite quite a few of my friends who are members of the California Surf Anglers, which is, a great resource on Facebook. For people who fish from the beach or close to the beach. But you know, looking at this, this is a slide here. This is my friend Jim Bixby, and he's a guy that provides me with a lot of great tools that help me keep my boat organized. And you can see on here, he's very organized. But you know, he's dragging his boat. He's got a 12-foot boat with a, you know, a 2.5 horsepower motor and all his gear. So, you know, we're up. This is a baby beach down in Dana Point, and we're kind of doing a bit of a stealth launch that day. There was a small group of us that went out. But, you know, you can see he's getting ready to drag his boat through the park. And then you can look off into the distance and you see a couple of guys that are already down there that have using a sand trolley, which you see on Jim's boat here. You just drag your boat right down to the sand and you launch off the beach.
This provides the basic rule for all fishermen, which is the need to accessorize as much as humanly possible and add as many things as you can. I love it. I love this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we're going to talk about accessorizing and over accessorizing. You know, here's the other end of the spectrum, and this isn't the bay, but this is my son's. You know, and at this point, we were, you know, we were 13 and 11, and out on Lake Convict. But, you know, this was like, you know, I think these guys beat me out on the water by about 20 minutes. You know, my older son, they just set up the boat, they threw it in the water and they jumped on, and they left all their fishing gear with me. So they were looking for that. And then, you know, we're going to go over, you know, this is actually more going to be a quick comparison of things in terms of, and I hate to say disadvantages. I like to say, no matter how you're looking at this, you're already, just by getting out on the water and exploring the bays and exploring maybe some of these near shore spots, you're already using your creativity and you're stepping outside of the bounds of what most people think you'd want to do by, you know, using, you know, at least fly fishing in Southern California. You know, for me, you know, I love destination fly fishing. You know, find me a warm flat somewhere and, you know, and some tailing bonefish, I'm in heaven. But I can't have that all the time. So, you know, you look at this here, and I love this photo because, you know, you see a guy off in the distance in an inflatable kayak. You could easily fly fish from that. See a guy paddling off on a stand-up paddleboard. That's an inflatable stand-up paddleboard he's on. No problem. You can do that in certain conditions. And then obviously in the front, you have the Scout here, and, you know, you can do quite a bit with that. You know, the other thing I wanted to talk about too, a little bit in comparing the different craft is, and and a lot of this has to do when you're talking about fly fishing, you talk about your sight line, you talk about, you know, being able to cast. And, you know, the one observation that I have, it's obvious, and anybody who's done this has experienced this too, but the lower in the water that you sit, you know, the more difficult it can be to cast, especially if you know, you're out for 3-4 hours and you start to have some fatigue, and on your back cast, you're dropping your rod tip a little bit. It's easy to foul your cast. It's also easy if you've got too much stuff in front of you or behind you to hang up. So, you know, the basic rule of thumb on this, and the thing to expect, is the lower you sit in the water, the more chances are you're going to foul your cast. If you can stand upright, that's optimal, because you can get the full range of your cast and you can get the full distance out of your cast. So, you know, sight line, I think, is something very important to consider. And it's not to say that, you know, looking in these Scouts, because these Scouts actually, even the way that they're set up, these photos, there's a bench seat in the front and there's a bench seat in the back. And yeah, sometimes I'll sit down and I will make that cast from sitting down. But the one thing I love is that I can stand up, whether I have the lean bar or not. I can actually stand up, and I can stand up and make that cast. You know, the simplest way to do this thing, and a lot of you, if you haven't done this before, you've probably already got one of these in your garage because you fly fish the Eastern Sierras, because you like to, you know, fish Crowley or Convict or any of the lakes up here, or maybe even some of the local bass lakes. You know, a pontoon boat or a float tube is a really, really, really easy way to do this. And, you know, if you got one in your garage, you can get out there and you can fish. You can launch from pretty much any beach. You just need to have enough stamina to get out there and kick around for a couple hours. And I know plenty of people that do that. You know, especially here in Newport Bay. This was my introduction to personal watercraft, and I don't even think we called it personal watercraft at the time. It was just kind of like a donut with some fins. And you know, what I used to do when I was a kid, you can do this on your own, or what I used to love to do when I was a kid is I would get, you know, me and a buddy would meet down at the bay. We'd figure out which way the tide was flowing. And one of us, we'd actually just create our own shuttle service, and we'd drop one car off at the bottom, both jump in, through our float tubes in the back of the truck, drive to the top, and, you know, drift the whole bay. And, you know, have some really fun times catching, you know, nice spotted bay bass and halibut. You know, we've even caught white sea bass doing that. So, you know, another thing about however you're going to do this that I love is it's a really good mixed bag. And most times you're not sight fishing. So like, it's a surprise, like when you hook up and you're pulling on something fun, you get up, oh man, I got a legal halibut. Oh, you know, I got a double.
And you bring up a good point, which is when you're using these, you do them with a buddy, especially when in the salt, I would say. So doing it with a friend, I think, could be important. Yep. So I think we've all got those devices in our garage someplace.
Yeah, totally. So anybody can do it. And if you don't have it, you can spend, you know, probably go to Big Five on sale and get the whole outfit for $200. You know, talking about stand-up paddle boards, and admittedly, you know, I've probably spent the least amount of time fishing from a stand-up paddle board. And, you know, before I got into Scout and before I signed up with them, this is a direction. This was the most natural direction for me that I thought I was going to go. We've got stand-up paddle boards. Outside of fly fishing, I'm passionate about surfing. I've actually been a surfboard builder since 2006. So probably even that same day where I went to the fly fishing fair in Glendale a couple years ago when Scout was on display, I had a materials list on my desk. I was getting ready to build a stand-up paddleboard. But you know, the one thing that always concerned me and why I didn't just jump to using my stand-up paddle boards for fly fishing or make that my go-to is, you know, it's really tough to take basically anything that I feel like you're going to need. It's tough to take the gear out that you're going to need. It's tough to keep it organized and in good shape. And the other thing is like, it's tough to make it a year-round thing. I don't mind being on a stand-up paddleboard in the warmer months, but I find that my chances of getting wet are a lot greater on a stand-up paddleboard. So, you know, for me, it really relies on the best conditions in order to make the most of it. And the other thing is,
I also think, in fairness, honestly that the younger and fitter you are, the more you're going to get pleasure out of it. So there's a certain, and you know, it's a personal thing, but there's a certain age cutoff, and I think we need to face that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of ageism, but like, you know, it's like I fish with my dad quite a bit. You know, he's like, you know, he's in his 60s, young for being my dad, but you know, like, you know, he's had a life on his knees. So, you know, he does a stand-up paddleboard thing, but he's not going to spend 4 to 5 hours fishing on one of these things.
I wouldn't put 90% of our club members on a stand-up paddleboard, but
yeah, to be honest with you, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool way to do it. And if you like, some of our club members and some of us have them, but you know, like, I don't think of that as my go-to fly fishing. I think that more is a workout or a different type of recreation.
So let's talk about kayaks a little. I think that's coming up.
Yeah. So kayaks probably come in as my second favorite these days as far as a go-to. You know, I love the rigidity of them. I love the fact that in terms of the way that they can get across the water, I love the fact that, you know, they work the best without using a motor, in my opinion. But the things that you know, and I brushed on this a little bit ago, but you know, the thing I don't enjoy about them is transporting them. I gave my kayaks to my parents. They get more use out of them than I do just because they like to paddle around. But, you know, at the same time, you know, like if you've got one, it's a great way to fish. The only things to keep in mind, you know, talking about that sight line, is you're sitting lower in the water. And the other thing is, other than transporting it, the other pain in the butt is, you know, you're never casting in a direction that's natural. Most times, because of the way that you're positioned, you're always casting off to the side with your body twisted. And the way that we learn to cast, we learn to point our body at the target. We need to be, you know, we need to be standing facing it. And there's a lot to think about if you're going to try and cast over the front of your kayak. I mean,
I think, Graham, I think that's one that they work so well in rivers, because you're pointing down the river and you're also casting at that straightforward 45-degree angle to the shore, and it works there. You know, something about kayaks that I just learned, probably from you, is that they're a lot more expensive than you think they are.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's you know, that same morning when I thought about building a stand-up paddleboard, I was also that week looking at new and used prices of a great product, you know, Hobie Pro Angler. There's a bunch of different companies that make them. They have inflatable ones, but like if you really want something nice, I feel like the Hobie is the best design for fishing. But you know, a brand new Hobie hull with no accessories is close to $5,000. And
wow, that's more than my first car cost. How can that be?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and that's not even really accessorizing. And I see guys on the water all the time that are just like you and I, that want to have all the accessories and the stuff. And they're 5 to 10, you know, they might have 7 to 10 grand into a kayak. And at that point, I'd rather have a fiberglass hull, you know, that I don't have to lift off the top of my car. So,
okay, so
yeah.
just, we might as well cover this right now. I already got a question asking about the rough price on the inflatable, the Scout Inflatables. We could probably.
Well, yeah, so I would say, like, you know, the bare bones is like, you know, the bare bones price on these things is like just under $1,200 for a 12-foot. And it is, you know, it's the better part of $1,400 for the 14-footer. And that comes with pretty much everything you need to get on the water, less power. So, you know, if you add power into it, you could spend $200 or $300 and put an electric trolling motor on it. Or you could spend, you know, you go to the used market and, you know, find a gas motor for $600, or buy a new one for $1,000 and get the advantage of the full warranty. But still, to have like a real, I mean, and I would consider that a real boat. You know, you're looking at what, 2,500, $3,000, like really nicely outfitted. I'm talking electronics, storage, everything, as opposed to $5,000 for just a hull and a paddle drive.
Oh, that's great. And, you know, honestly, I'm quite surprised by that. So that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I like a good deal and I like value. So like that was the other thing that led me down the path of the Scout, and that's why I can gladly tell everybody and pass that on.
Okay, and just related, I just got a quick question. There is a need to register them, and I guess there's a DMV cost associated with that.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually, that's a question that I get asked a lot, and you know, it ends up being about $65 at this point for 2 years. So you get a 2-year registration for $65. And I plead with people not to go to the DMV and do that. If you have a AAA membership, do it at AAA. You're in and out in a half an hour. And, you know, the other thing, if you don't have a AAA membership, it's worth the minimum membership just to be able to use that service. Like, you know, if you think about the value of your time, you could spend 2 hours at the DMV, even with an appointment, trying to register a stupid boat. You know, even if I had to pay an extra $35, whatever it costs, I don't know, my wife pays the bill at this point on the AAA membership, but like, you know, I'm in and out when it's actually, whenever I get a new boat at this point, I should say, like, I love these things so much. I own 4. So,
all right, let's get onto those then.
All right. It's very good. So, yeah. So, and this is why, honestly, like I come down to this, and this is why, in my opinion, it's the ultimate solution. You know, I can fish the bay in these things. You know, I've taken these things, you know, I've been 3.5 miles offshore, you know, in these things. And, you know, I can get to the water fast. It's very, very little physical effort to actually get to where you're going. I find that with these things, I spend more time fishing and thinking about fishing and making sure that I'm mentally prepared and making the best decisions about fishing because of this device. And the biggest part of it, the separator there, is that thing that you see on the back. It's the gas motor. The second thing is just being able to stand up in the thing. That it's wonderful. I mean, I can walk and it's comfortable on my feet. You know, believe it or not, these things have an inflatable floor, but if you blow it up to 5 PSI, I mean, people think it's a rigid floor, but it's not. And then the other thing is too, they're incredibly stable. The design of these things, they're flat bottom boats. And, you know, between the flat bottom and the curvature of the pontoons, it's very, very difficult to, I've actually never been able to overturn one of these things. And I've gotten really close to where, like, you know, I've got too much crap on the floor of my boat and tripped over myself and start heading over in one direction, grab onto the stability bar, but the thing won't pull over.
Are these all single person?
No, actually, so they're single person I'd say they're single person for fly fishing. You know, just because, you know, you've got the long rod and you don't want anybody in your back cast. But so tomorrow, you know, I'll be taking my kids out, and, you know, I got two boys, and I take out the 14-footer, put 3 bench seats in it. They'll fish on the fly, but tomorrow they want to fish with their spinning reels. So there'll be 3 of us on this boat. And if you're a conventional angler, or if you don't mind doing that, you can easily fish 2 people on a 12-footer and 3 people on the 14-footer.
Great, thanks.
But yeah, no, I just, you know, and as I say, the motor and the stability are just really and the range that I can go, or what set me going on these. I love them. One quick thing to mention, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just something to be aware of. And I don't even know that they're actively enforcing this yet. I've never been stopped or known anybody that's been stopped, but I've noticed in marketing online a lot lately, the state is pushing for a boater safety card, which, you know, requires that, you know, anybody operating a vessel with a motor, you know, there's an age limit to it. And, you know, they're basically asking that you take their course. So that's just something to look into. And I'm not going to tell you to go out without having it. If you've got the time to do it, you might as well get it over with, because right now they're doing it in a way where you get it once, and I don't think they're making you do it again. So, you know, get your card. And, you know, because I do believe that they are ramping up to do that. And then the other benefit of taking that course, which is important, and no matter what craft you're using, know the rules. Like when you're out on the water and you're new at it, you're going to feel like you're driving on a freeway with no lanes and no directions. But there are lanes and there are directions. And it's good training. So. You know, and I'm going to go over just some basic stuff to what you can use, like, you know, to get your boat moving. You've got manual stuff like your fins, you got oars, you got paddles, you got a lot of options depending on what you're using. You know, you've got, even now, like if you look at this third image down, that's it's like an e-propulsion motor that runs off a built-in lithium battery. So if you're environmentally conscious, you can get something like that will in some ways equal the power you'd get out of the gas, but you can always use your legs, you can use your hands, you can use a lot of different things.
How much does a decent used 2.5 horsepower motor cost you?
Well, prior to COVID and prior to containers getting backed up off the coast of California, I was picking up the last one I bought. I think I picked up a 2.5 horsepower Yamaha, which is an excellent motor. I picked it up for about $500. New it'll cost you double that.
Amazing. But, okay, great.
And the going rate is really $600 or $700, depending on where you find it. So I still feel like that's the best option, you know, but, you know, just be aware that there's a lot of different stuff. A lot of guys who are cost conscious will go with a Newport Vessels 55-pound thrust trolling motor and a deep cycle battery. And I think like between Amazon and what you buy the battery for at the auto parts store at Costco, you're looking at less than $300 to power your boat.
And people can call you and get advice on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And anything we talk about today, this is really just an overview. And if you really want to take a deep dive into it, I encourage you to call me and reach out. I love talking about this stuff, as you'll see.
All right, let's keep moving here.
You know, and just some obvious stuff, you know, with this, like, you know, and again, I hate using the words advantage, disadvantage, but you know, the major advantage to using physical propulsion is like, it's just, you know, it's light, it's inexpensive. The major thing to think about is it's how far you can go, and how much time on the water is basically going to be on how much stamina you have and how much strength you have.
Great.
You know, and as far as electric stuff goes, you know, we talked about this a little bit, you know, and again, I hate to use the word advantage, disadvantage, but the best value in an electric motor is the one you see on the bottom there. It's a little, you know, electric trolling motor, really inexpensive. It'll only go 2 to 3 miles an hour, but you know, with these boats, it's not a race. These aren't speed machines. Like basically, you know, even if you put one of these on a kayak or something else, you're not trying to get there fast. You're just trying to reduce the amount of energy you exert. You know, the top option is a really, really cool option, but you know, you're limited by, you know, in anything with a battery, 4 to 5 hours on the water, unless you take multiple batteries. And then, you know, the item on the top, you know, is twice as much as a gas motor with the same horsepower. Okay. So the expense is greater. And then there's my favorite, there's the gas. You know, just something, and this is probably the most common question I get asked. I've actually written a couple different articles just on the variations of motor types. You know, the thing to know about these things, and especially from the vantage point of the type of craft we're talking about today, you know, really 2.5 horsepower to 3.5 horsepower is the sweet spot. You really don't need anything more than that. If you're going more than that, it's cool. You can go a little bit faster. You get gears and you get a fuel tank, an external fuel tank. If you go like, you know, 4 or 6 horsepower, you start to get into that, but you're also going to double your weight. Like one of these small motors, like a 2.5 to 3.5, you're looking at like 30, 40 pounds at the most. When you go above that, you're looking at like 60, 70 pounds. So they're heavy. The other thing to know quickly about these motors is, you know, if you see a Mercury, Suzuki, Tohatsu, you know, Evinrude, anything under 50 horsepower that's made by any of those brands and is actually made by Tohatsu. So, you know, like, don't worry about the label so much on those motors, because all you're paying for is the branding that comes with it. Where I see a lot of value in motors, I'm a Yamaha guy. They've got, Tohatsu doesn't make that. Yamaha makes their own motors. The build quality is great. They're a little heavier, but the build quality is great. They're extremely reliable. It takes nothing to start them. You know, that little Yamaha guy or the little Honda guy down there, I love Honda cars. I'm not as much of a fan of their motors, at least this small stuff. The build quality on them, the components, especially when used in salt, they don't seem to hold up as well. That little 2.3 guy, what's cool about him is he's air cooled, and you don't have to worry about oil leaks, but they're loud. As I say, they don't last as long. And for a 2.3 horse, I don't feel like they've got as much thrust as either a Mercury, Tohatsu, or a Yamaha.
Once again, this is something people can call and talk to you about in more detail. All right, cool.
Other things that you need to have on hand, you know, like whenever you're going out, you need to, for whatever you're using, and you can go to the Coast Guard website, you know, I've got this list here, but just make sure you've got the basic safety equipment. Being safe on the water is really, really important. And I didn't mention it here, but Marshall, you mentioned it just a little bit ago. Take a buddy, you know, but make sure that you take the stuff you need. And if you're using something inflatable, make sure you take a net, because you don't want to bounce fish off these things, especially something with spines. The Scouts are really durable. They're 1100, you know, 1100 denier PVC. So we've bounced fish off them, but you know, like, you just don't want to mess with it. So net all your fish. And it's, right. You know, so, you know, organization. So this is something I want to talk about here. And this shot shows it really well. You know, one thing I do like about the kayak is that you know, not that it's necessarily a good thing, but I can take more stuff. These are two really well-loaded kayaks. But the one thing about organization that I want to stress is that it's really, really important, especially as a fly angler, to have your stuff organized. Because if you're not organized and your deck's not clear, if your kayak floor is not clear, if you've got stuff popping up, a GoPro 2 feet over your head, you're going to hang your fly line on it, which, you know, you do that enough, you're just going to get frustrated. You know, and this goes back to a couple of the other craft that we talk about. This guy, you can see, this is actually a guy fly fishing from a stand-up paddleboard. Your storage is your deck. And a lot of these things come with tie downs, but he's got a little crate, which is fine and dandy. But if you're in the heat of battle, or if you're in less than perfect conditions, you got slop, it's really difficult to access that stuff without losing something over the side. That's the other thing I did not mention about stand-up paddleboard fly fishing is, you know, dang me if I don't lose something almost every time I go and try to do that.
What about line management? I think
yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about line management. We're going to get to that in a future slide, and we're going to talk about the importance. And I think that's just a few slides away. But on a stand-up paddleboard, you've always got to know where your line is, because it's really easy to stand on top of it. There's ways around that. And that's what we've got here. So, you know, I've got this Scientific Anglers made this really, really awesome. It's an e-coastal, you know, it's a foam stripping basket. And that's really the easiest way not to step on your line. I'll be honest, I don't enjoy wearing a stripping basket, but if the wind is anything above 3 knots, you better believe I'm going to have one of these things strapped to my waist. You know, on the decks of these boats that I fish from, there's actually an ample amount of floor space. And most times what I'm doing is like, and you saw in a previous shot, is I'm leaning up against this the stability bar with my back. So I've got like 3 feet of space where I can dump my line. But if it's windy, it's not going to go straight down when I'm dumping it. It's going to hang up on my stability bar. It's going to hang up on my fish finder, on my oars, on the back of my motor. It's spaghetti. So the easiest way to do that is to use a stripping basket.
If you take more than one rod, do you have rod storage issues?
Actually, I do typically take more than one rod, and I don't have rod storage issues. What I would advise people to avoid doing is storing them vertically, the way that you'd see them kind of in rocket launchers. That's a pain in the butt. But Jim Bixby, my friend Jim, you know, in his brand Biggs Fish, he came up with for this type of a craft, he came up with a pontoon mount, horizontal rod mount. So I use those, and I basically just strap my rods to the pontoons with his system. Before that, what I was doing was I was taking, like, right underneath my fish finder, where you see here, right to the left of it, I would just put a piece of EVA foam, and I would tack that down. And then I would rest my rod tips on that. And then I would rest the rod butts behind the reels on one of my bench seats, on my rear bench seat. So horizontal is important. Keep it out of the way.
Okay, good.
Rod storage. There you go. So there's a great picture of it. There's Jim's system at the top with a couple of conventional rods set up. And if you look below, you can see, you know, my rod setting on a padded bench seat. Dry storage is also important, you know, just for the stuff that you don't want to get wet, your car keys, your wallet, any documentation you have. If you've got some camera equipment, you can use like what you see here on the top, which is like a fish pond, you know, the fish pond bag, or you can use a, you know, I've got one of these roto molded cooler. It says Scout on it. That was totally unintentional. That's just the model of theirs, but that's one that really works great. And I like it because I can actually stick like a soft padded seat, like a stadium style seat on top of it, and get a little bit more cushion for my butt when I motor around.
Right, good.
You know, and, you know, I want to now we're getting into a point, which is actually the doing, and a little bit more how outfitting applies to the doing. And, you know, when you're thinking about where to go, if you want to attack, you know, if you want to go and give this a try, you know, really I'd say the number one thing to consider is first, what do you have handy? You're not going to go fish La Jolla kelp in a flow tube, but I think you'd already know that. You know, but what do you have handy? What can you make the most of? And what do you have access to? The next thing that I think is really, really important is, what do you have confidence in doing? You know, what is your experience level and what are you going to feel comfortable in? Because, you know, I will tell you that I don't believe anything's big, bad, and scary, but the ocean's a gnarly place, even when you're inshore. So, you know, there's a lot of things to consider when you're doing that. So, and then also the other thing is like, what type of conditions are you going to be fishing in? Conditions actually will have a lot to do with the success of your day and how much you enjoy, you know, being on the water. So
What are you looking for when you're trying to find fish right now?
let's talk about that. So, you know, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You know, the easiest way to do it is the old fashioned way, this visual cues, you know, just using your eyes. And, you know, when you're fishing in the bay, the wonderful thing about fishing in the bay and the wonderful and kind of starting point for me was you got a lot of structure that you can see. So, you know, if you're fly fishing in the bay or, you know, fishing in the bay from a personal watercraft, you could literally kick off the beach and go over to the nearest set of pilings, or, you know, those moorings with the buoy lines, because they're anchored at the bottom. So wherever that is, you've got structure. So you're looking for exposed structure. You know, and, you know, I mean, regardless of where if it's popping up out of the water and it's stable, there's a good chance that there's fish hanging out around the bottom of it, especially spotted bay bass, because they're, you know, they like to find their spot and they stay there. You know, if you don't have exposed structure, if you're fishing open water, you know, fishing some of the bigger bays was intimidating for me. But, you know, if you sit still long enough, just like you do out on the blue water, if you have any experience blue water fishing, is birds are your friends. If you see birds working, or if you see, you know, if you see bait fish or even fish jumping, in the bay, a lot of time fish jumping is mullet. Which, you know, is more of a tease than anything else. Although I've actually caught them on the fly. You know, exposed structure and birds working, nervous water, you know, you just watch the water surface. So that's the easiest way to do it visually. You know, this shot shows that well. This obviously isn't in the bay. I wish it was. This was in the Marquesas a couple of years ago, but you know, this is fish just, you know, this is actually a nice school of tarpon daisy chaining. That was pretty awesome and frustrating at the same time, because they weren't ready to eat that day. This is an over exaggeration of birds working the surface, but you can be out on any bay and you could see birds. You'd see the terns. They'll flock up and they'll just start dive bombing, and they're not getting anything. But that usually means, you know, here that you've got fish schooled up onto the surface. And the further south you go, that might mean short fin corvina. That might mean, you know, actually, you know, nice schools of yellowfin croaker, bonita, you name it. So this is a good indicator, and you boogie over to that as fast as you can. If you see,
You've also got depth finders to help you too, right?
yeah, actually, yes. And, you know, looking at, you know, the electronic side of it, this is just a shot of exposed structure. Like there was fish. I pulled 7 fish off of this dock right here within like 10 minutes. But yeah, so we've got the electronics, and, you know, you can use the electronics in the typical sense, but me, myself, I've never sat there looking for those arcs that they talk about. And you'll see them sometimes, like, you know, and, you know, if you see a bait school or a big solid, you know, batch that's moving through pretty quickly, yeah, that's exciting. But where this can be your friend and really, really help out is, you know, you can look at the screen right here, and you can look at, there's multiple clues that gives here, but you see a change in depth. You see, you know, a change in, you see the water temperature, which is really, really important, especially if you're fishing near shore, doing the kelp beds during the summer. And then also looking at the different colors, that's the density of whatever structure that is. So, you know, the darker it is, the more dense it is. And this is like,
and then, of course, I mean, apart from that, tide and weather is really important as well with all this.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, and there's ways you can do that. Your fish finder's not really going to do that, but every day or every time when I'm planning a trip, you know, there's plenty of tools for that. Some you can pay for, some are free. You know, as far as tides, wind, and general surface conditions go, Surfline's my go-to. It's $100 a year. I use it to surf too and decide when I'm going to go surfing. but it's a great indicator on tides. They've got access to really good, the technology they have and the modeling they have is awesome. And it actually is a pretty reliable forecast for even 7 to 14 days out. If you're looking for free ones, there's free tide apps out there. The Tide Alert app is free and has the tides all over the place. You can even see what time to go. Wind apps like Windy have live modeling and it's free, and it'll show you what the wind looks like for the next, forecasted to look like. If you're, one of those guys, most of us who are fly fishermen who like to do, backcountry stuff, we're already using Google Earth to find things, but you can use Google Earth to find reefs that are exposed. And then, if you're looking for, just information on the resource, wildlife.ca.gov is a good one too. And, the other thing I was going to say is you can also, if you don't mind paying for it, the Navtronic app is pretty handy too.
Good, great.
So, this is just a screenshot of what my dashboard on Surfline looks like. I don't even know what spot this is. But you can see here, you've got surf height information. You got, more important for me is the swell information. And then this bottom one with the wind, it shows me when the wind's gonna come up huge. And these are screenshots right here of some of the other apps that I use that I had mentioned. So, up in the top left here, I've got Windy. If you download Windy, you'll actually see as the thing plays, you'll see the direction of the wind and how fast it goes, and it's color coded. On the top right here, this is what I was using before Surfline. It was just a, the Tide app, but it's also pretty handy. I still use it. The ProCharts GPS, this is a free version of it. But like if I'm going to launch somewhere and I want to try a new spot, this is really good for mapping distance. So it can show me how far I'm going to go. And then, again, on the bottom left here, we have Google Earth, and this is actually San Clemente. So you have San Clemente Pier here, and this is a rock pile that pops up, that is exposed on lower tides. But you can go on Google Earth and just scroll up and down the coastline and find some of this stuff. All right, and then the other thing to consider when you're out there is California MPA's marine protected areas. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but if you're fishing inshore or near shore, there are some places that are off limits. And I recommend that if you don't have a fish finder with these maps built into it, that you go and study a map and figure out where you're not supposed to be. Because if you're there, you might find, oh man, I'm in this great spot. I can't believe nobody else is here. Well, there's probably a good reason for it. And when I'm saying everybody else is here, I'm not talking about personal watercraft. I'm talking about commercial boats, private boaters, things like that. So just something to keep in mind. Great, thank you. All right, and now we're just going to talk a little bit about some different scenarios here, and the bays and the harbors. If you're just starting out, this is a great place to start. I always recommend taking a buddy, but the other reason why this is a great place is there's always people on the water. So it's really hard to get in trouble. The harder way to get in trouble is if you're in a small craft, big boats breezing through don't see you. So, but a great place to start, you could literally kick, from where you're at here, you could kick like, 20, 30 feet right off of a public beach and you can be fishing. And it's really simple and you can have results. And what do you need for doing that? As far as outfitting for the bays and harbor, you need some type of watercraft, you need some propulsion, got to have your basic safety equipment. The thing that most of you are probably interested in is what kind of tackle do I need to do that? And that is part of outfitting. 6 to 8 weight rods, 250 grain to 350 grain sinking lines, 8 to 12 pound fluorocarbon leader. And then as far as flies go, like if you've just got some clouser minnows, I rarely get away from clouser minnows or deceivers in the bay. The other thing I like about it in the bay is you can rig up 2 of them, so you can get doubles. And these fish, they'll school up, even the spotted bay bass, and on a 6 weight, having 2, like even if they're like 12, 13, 14-inch fish, they pull really, really hard. And it's really, really fun. So, like if you've got a 6 weight and you've got a, basic sinking line, you're in business. I always take an 8 weight too, because I will tell you, I can't tell you the amount of times I've been out there and decided I was going to throw, something bigger. And I caught a really nice halibut, a 20-inch plus white sea bass. Even in the bay last summer in San Diego, we were catching some nice bonita beneath the Coronado Bay Bridge. So like take an 8-weight, take a 6-weight. I stick with the 6-weight until I know that there's potentially bigger stuff. And sometimes it's nicer if you've already got the numbers. If you put a dozen spotties on the boat, you can switch to a bigger fly, big bait, big fish. You might not catch as many, but the chances are there. I saw a photo last week of a guy in one of the local bays here who got a really nice striped bass. And, I think he caught it on conventional tackle, but every time I see that, I go, man, I could totally outfish that dude with a fly.
That's good. Great.
So, and getting to the water, you can, the thing about fishing on the bays is like all the bays and harbors have public launch ramps. And a lot of them have like easy access public beaches. The thing to be concerned about with this, when you're launching with something that has a motor, I would say, is don't make a lot of noise and pay attention to the signs, because if they've got signs posted that say don't launch with a motor here, don't launch with a motor there, because it'll take about 30 seconds for somebody to call the harbor master, and they'll be over there telling you to get off the beach, pack up your stuff, and go use the ramp. So, but if the other experience that I have is if you keep your motor out of the water and you're willing to row past the buoy lines, the swim buoys, like we did that here this day. This is in Alamitos Bay, by the kayak launch. They'll let you share the kayak launch as long as you're not cranking and revving your motor. And what was that movie, that Chevy Chase movie? It was like Summer Vacation or something, when pulled out the boat and just, suck my wake. Don't suck my wake. And then, we talked a little bit about this already, but what does it look like? What does fishing the bay look like? Well, it really looks like you're casting on exposed structure. There is, in all these bays, there's drop-offs. There's, some of them have reefs and shallow flats that really come alive in different tidal conditions. There's a huge variety. I mean, if you're just doing it on the basic, you can do it just by using your eyes. If you've got electronics, it opens up a whole nother world. And there's just really great fishing to be had. There is deeper water fishing than the 8 to 15 inch deep, but I find that 8 to 15 inch deep is the most productive. And, like what I'm looking for in my fish finders, I'm looking for those rapid depth changes to where it goes from 15 feet to like maybe 4.5 feet. And I'm fishing either side of that break, and it's very, very productive. The other thing, in some of the bays, we have really healthy grass beds. A lot of people know this, a lot of people don't know this, but even in certain bays, we have really healthy populations of a different species of bonefish, and you're not sight fishing them, but they're there. But, you cast in some grass beds, you find some of these grass beds, or even holes in the grass beds, like these donuts, and you put your fly in there and you're on. So that's really a lot of what you're looking for. But, you could do this before, prior to me having a Scout or even a regular boat. I mean, half of my teens and the first half of my 20s were spent in the bays, and I never got bored. Sorry about that. That was a video. And things to consider on the bay, like trying to decide when to go. The most important thing about this, and when guys call me to book a guide trip, they ask me, oh, when should we go? Are we going first thing in the morning? Are we going, this? And it's like, well, it really depends on the tidal movement. If there's not a lot of tidal movement, it's not necessarily going to be the best day. My indicator for when I decide when I want to go fish the bay is I want some healthy tidal flow. The more the tide is flowing, actually, the less you have to work, because the thing is, you can cast a fly out, you can let your line sink, and you can go with the drift. And literally, you can just hook up on the drift. You can drift for these fish and catch more than you'd want to. So it's not like we're false casting our brains out all day long. And I catch a lot of fish on the fly, probably more fish on the fly that way than I ever had when I was conventional angling. And, other things to consider too is like wind. If I'm looking at wind, I don't mind being down in Mexico and having 13 to 14 knots on the flats. But, when I'm out on the bay, You know, especially here in California, it gets snotty once you get up above like 7, 8 knots. It's just not a lot of fun. So, you know, like for me, optimal is no wind. But if it's like, you know, 3 to 4 knots of wind, I'm not going to stress in my Scout. If it's above 4 knots, I certainly would consider whether or not I was going to go out in a float tube or some of these other craft, just because I don't want to get wet. I don't want to get bounced around. And then, you know, the other thing to consider when you're fishing in the bays here, we're in Southern California, we got a lot of boat owners. You need to be aware of the boat traffic. So if you go on a holiday weekend where the weather's going to be nice, you can't be pissed off if somebody almost runs you over like 10 times, because that's what you're going to get.
Yeah,
So,
it's part of being here. Yep.
Yeah, it's part of being here. And then just be aware of where you're not supposed to be, because a lot of the governmental agencies, Navy's, Coast Guard, they have docks in places they don't want you, and they're really clear about that. They post a lot of signs. And then if you're offshore, you know, which we'll talk about in a little bit, there's other things to look for there. But jetties. You know, this is kind of the next level of it. You know, I would say that I would consider this more of an intermediate thing, just because you're closer to the open ocean. You're dealing with swells and surges. You're dealing with, and wherever there's jetties, that means there's a channel, and that usually means there's boats going in and out of it. So you're looking at increased boat traffic. You're looking at sloppier conditions. And, you know, it's a little bit more challenging, but it can be super productive. You know, when I'm fishing the jetties, you know, basically the lightest rod that I'm going to fish is going to be, you know, like an 8 to 8 weight rod, but realistically like a 9 or a 10 weight. And the reason why I say that is not because you've got the chance of catching a bigger fish, but because of the type of structure it is. You know, you've got to be able to horse that fish out. And the other thing is too, it's typically a little bit deeper where you're fishing on the jetties, depending on the tide and depending on where the sand is in that season. But you're going to need to get down faster. And you're also going to, you know, you're going to want to, and a big part of getting down faster is, especially when you're fishing calico bass, which like to hang out in these jetties, or, you know, halibut will cruise along the bottom. You want to be able to get down to those fish fast. You want to get past the perch. You want to get past the mackerel. You want to get past a lot of those things. And the faster you can get to the bottom, the faster you're going to get to the big fish. And, you know, again, you know, clouser minnows, deceivers, you know, any bait fish patterns, as long as, and if you're going to fish a bait fish pattern unweighted, go heavier on the line, or even some of those sculpin patterns work great, especially for calico bass. So, you know, and I wouldn't recommend doing the jetties most places in a float tube. I would say for Newport, you could probably get away if you can kick out there. You know, you could fish around the bait barge on the outside. I've seen guys do it in float tubes. I don't have to, so I won't. But you know, I like the ability, and the reason why I would say, you know, still the Scout or even a kayak with a pedal drive is just because there's so many boats moving in and out of there. It's easier to hold your position with a little bit more power. And if there's like, you know, 105-foot sport boat cruising through and he doesn't see you because he doesn't, you can get the hell out of his way fast.
Great.
And, you know, access to this, you know, this is like, you know, a lot of this stuff, either like the closest beach or, you know, the closest launch ramp. And I put this on here too, you know, down in San Diego, there's great fishing in the Zuniga jetties, the submerged jetties. And the best place to launch, obviously, you know, if you've ever been there before, you're not going to launch there. You're not going to fish a float tube there. Might not even fish a kayak there, although I've seen guys do it. It's a little bit of a hike, but, you know, this is a shelter island launch ramp. That's the easiest way to get there. And I'd recommend that doing that from a motorized craft. And then what fishing looks like. We talked about this a little bit, but it's fairly vertical fishing. You're not sight fishing. You're casting out, letting your fly sink, trying to keep your line tight, keep the slack out of your line so you can feel grabs as things are falling, or as the fly's falling.
Looking good.
And then again, same things to consider, you know, consider tidal flow, consider wind, consider traffic, you know, like on when to go out. The other thing too, if you're comfortable with it and you're I'd say an intermediate to experienced level personal watercraft fisherman, the best place to fish the jetties in places like this are sundown and when the sun goes down. I find that it's a lot more productive. Those big fish come out of their holes on the rocks. So, time of day is not on here, but I would consider that as well when you're fishing jetties. Kelp beds and reefs. This is where, having at the minimum a kayak, but this is where the Scout really shines. This photo, it's me and a couple of other guys on Scouts, and we've just launched off La Jolla shores, and we're probably already a mile offshore, and we're going to fish 2 to 3 miles offshore. But, right now it's just us, but, fast forward 2 hours in the morning and we're fishing amongst center consoles, sport boats, other kayakers. It was fairly calm here, but that day, we had a swell building, and by the end of the day, we were fishing in 3 to 4 foot swells. So, that's where this is 2 levels up from anything you're going to do. This is when you really need some boating experience in order to be able to do it, or have somebody with you who has some boating experience.
Yeah, good point.
So, and outfitting for this kayak, I see a lot of kayakers out there. I see them in my wake as I'm breezing by them with my motor. But, I really recommend that, this is where I'd recommend having a pontoon boat with something 2.5 horsepower gas or more. I get a lot of guys that ask me, can I do that with an electric motor? Yeah, you can do it with an electric motor, probably one of those e-propulsion motors, but I wouldn't do this in a flow tube. Like even if you've got a strong current and swells, 2.5 horses will get you in, but you drastically lose speed and the power to move forward. Having some knowledge, basic safety equipment. This is another place, like when I'm talking about tackle, that I'm fishing 8 to 10 weight rods and reels. And out here, it's about the structure, because you're fishing kelp, or you're fishing, you might be fishing some reef with some holes in it. But the other thing is, when you're doing this, you now have an opportunity to get into some real fish, especially somewhere like La Jolla kelp beds. Yeah, there's 30-pound yellowtail cruising around there all day long. And you might not catch one every day, but you're sure not going to want to be undergunned if you get one of those, because he'll either spool you or he'll wrap you around the rocks or the kelp. So again, 8 to 10 weight rods. I've got 4,000 grain sinking lines. It's really 400 grain sinking lines, but fast sinking lines to get deep, because you're going to fish in this case, maybe 20 to 60 feet of water. So you want to get down as fast. You might need to soak for a while too. And then heavy fluorocarbon leader. Out here, I'm fishing bigger, deep clousers. A lot of bait fish patterns. If I'm fishing kelp stringers or rocks, I'm going to fish some of those big sculpin patterns that I would use for the jetties as well. And this is just a pretty shot. This is Josh Merrill. He's actually one of my fellow pro staff for Scout. And this is a kelp bed up in Morro Bay. So, and I threw this shot in here. This isn't Southern California. It's more Central California. But I just wanted to show you this because it really opens up your eyes to some things you can do with this. And, if I look at the point of this presentation, that's what a lot of it was, is I really wanted to open everybody's mind to saltwater fishing in different ways you could do it. You put that Scout inflatable in the back of your truck or in the back of your car, which you could literally fit it in a boot. You drive, 4 hours up to a place like Morro Bay on the California coast. It's gorgeous. There's tons of fish there, and it's something you've never done before. It's a new experience. And to me, that's
looks
really
fantastic, doesn't it? Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's amazing, And then, as far as getting there, a lot of the nearshore spots in Southern California, or even in Central California, like I just showed you, you can launch from a ramp or the closest beach out to the open water, no problem. But the other beautiful thing about Southern California is we have beaches like, this boat right here. This is a day we launched on La Jolla shores. Just wait for a day when you've got maybe 1 to 2 foot surf with long intervals in between the swells, and you can launch straight from the beach. Fishing La Jolla, that's really the only way to do it. You're not going to launch one of these things or anything else from a harbor and make it out there. If you want to fish La Jolla, you're going to have to launch from the beach. And I do recommend the first time you do that is going with somebody experienced, because, I can't tell you how many times that I've seen people overturn their boats. And admittedly, when I first started doing this, I'd consider myself an experienced waterman. you know, I've ended up on the wrong side of a wave with a lot of water in my boat. So, you know,
Yeah,
something
got to be careful.
you really do. And that's another reason why I would say that if you're going to do the offshore stuff, it takes a little bit of experience. If you feel like you've got the experience to do it and you've never done it before, I recommend going to some place like Dana Point, where it's a short haul from the boat ramp to the open water. That's why so many people do it. So, you know, maybe do that first, get around out there. We did that actually back in February. I had a group of 8 to 10 guys, and I had a slide of it earlier in this presentation where we just, you know, we went and launched out of Dana Point. And a lot of those guys, it was their first time in open water, and they had a great time and it was safe. And now their confidence is built and they'll take the next steps. So
yeah,
on
we've
this,
got a few questions coming up
Sure.
on that subject. So
Sure. Well, we'll talk about what that looks like. You know, most of the time you're fishing a drift. You can use a drift anchor, which controls your drift. Or if you're not in super deep water, I take 75 feet of rope and I've got a small anchor. So if I need to hold a spot, I can do that. You can actually, if you're fishing kelp beds, you can tie up to the kelp. And again, deeper water. And what you're really doing when you're on open water, you're casting the fly over to the rocks, or you're basically letting it drift down a strand of kelp and seeing what picks up along the way. You can also actually, you know, the other thing that works sometimes too, and it's kind of a cheater way of doing it, but if you're moving from spot to spot, grab a heavier fly and, you know, your heavier rod, you can drag that fly behind the boat and they'll eat that too. Especially like a bonita yellowtail, you can get yellowtail that way too. And this was a guy, this is a friend of mine, this is Sam. And actually at the point when I met him, he was a guide client, and we're, you know, maybe about a mile off Dana Point. This was actually last November. The bonita stayed late, but you know, he's in a 12-foot boat with a 2.5 horsepower motor in open water. You'll look at the seas behind him and you'll see that they're relatively calm. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, but those are the type of conditions you want to think about fishing in when you go offshore. So, you know, check the conditions before you go. That's really, really, really important. You don't want to go when the swell's big. Like this weekend, we've got a huge swell rolling in. I wouldn't be offshore in any of my craft. You know, I wouldn't even be offshore in a fiberglass hull because, you know, if it's breaking head high to overhead on the beaches, there's swell that's feeding that just coming in offshore. So the swell, look at the wind. You won't catch me at the days that I am looking for to be out on the water where I are, you know, on the open ocean is when I'm not looking at any more than 5 knots of wind. Swells might be coming in through at, you know, 1 to maybe 3 feet max with very long intervals. Another thing to consider, like I said, on holidays is boat traffic won't stop me from going. But if you know that the weather's nice, you need to be extra aware because they do not see you. They'll blast right by you and suck my wake. And you'll be dealing with wake. And there's ways to handle yourself in that too. You know, you got it. If you're motoring forward and there's, you know, a 40-foot, you know, fly bridge that's cruising past you at 15 knots, he's going to leave a wake. And you don't want to try and beat him. You're going to have to go behind him. You're going to have to slow down. You don't want to stop. And you're going to have to take that swell at an angle. So you're not taking it on the head. And so you're not ending up with your stuff in the water.
Good point.
Yeah. So it's all, you know, and that's the other thing. And I leave, you know, I'm going to leave it's open for questions. And I'm going to also invite you to call me and talk to me about this stuff. Or if you want to do it for the first time and you've got enough experience to do that, you know, we can set up, you know, I would say that half of my guide trips are guys that want to go fish. The other half are guys that just want to learn some knowledge on how to do it comfortably. It's almost like half fishing school and half boating school, but I'm happy to do that as well. You know, you just being out on the water with somebody who's done it before, you get a lot of experience. But the other thing offshore is visibility. You won't necessarily deal with that so much in the bays and harbors, although it can get foggy. But I'll tell you what, like conditions can change and fog can roll in really fast. if you're, you might be a mile offshore, a mile and a half shore, but all of a sudden you're out in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, when a fog rolls in and you don't know whether you're north, south, how far are you off? So it's really, really important to have that, that into consideration. And if you're going to do that and it's any bit questionable, that's another reason to have electronics and a GPS on board. You're not going to have a sonar, but, you know, like at least you kind of know where you are in relation to things. If it's going to be foggy, if I think it might be foggy, I typically won't even venture offshore, because the other thing you have to look out for, big boats aren't looking out for you, and they're going to look out for you less when there's fog. So visibility.
Right. So don't go out in the fog. We got it.
Not on one of these things, not on anything small like that. And then, you know, as far as any of this stuff, you know, I'm kind of coming to, and I'll be able to take some questions here, Marshall, but, you know, the thing I wanted to do again is just open up everybody's eyes and minds to what you might be able to do out there on the water. You know, you can get creative. You don't just have to fly fish for trout in California. You know, you don't have to travel somewhere to do it. You can get out there with some basic tools and start having some fun. You know, and the thing is, like, if you've only got, you don't have to be out even for 3 or 4 hours. If you live, you know, if you can make it with your, you know, load up and your unload and your commute, you can have a lot of fun in a couple hours. And, you know, you can go and decide you're going to go first thing in the morning and still make lunch with, you know, with your friends in the afternoon. Or you can, you know, I can't tell you how many times during football season, you know, like I'm fishing with friends in the morning and they want to make the kickoff at 2. You know, no problem. You know, we can go and do that. And then, you know, the other thing I would encourage you to do is, if any of this seems intimidating, pick the easiest part, pick the path of least resistance. As you go out more and more, you'll build confidence, you'll build knowledge, and, you know, you'll have a skill that and information that you can have fun with for the rest of your life, you know. And it's just, you know, it's a great thing for in between trips, especially, you know, this last year with COVID. Nearshore and inshore was my saving grace. All of my trips got canceled, you know, everything I was going to do. And the other thing is, beautiful thing about doing this, if you go out with friends, even if you go out with a few buddies, you know, there's still enough distance between you where you're not getting caught up in somebody's back cast. You can still socialize, because at the best, you're like 10, 15, maybe 20 feet apart. So, you know, in terms of, I know things are easing up as we're all getting vaccinated and we're able to venture out again. But, you know, this is the way that me and a lot of my fishing friends, you know, we kept sane over the last year. So as that's easing up, it's another great reason to try it.
Great. These are really good points. Yep. So we at Q&A. Let me see. All right. I've got some Q&A for you here. Let's see. The first one in was Tim Ho, and he wants to know if the Scout comes with a bag. I seem to remember you had a slide, but I didn't see it, which is where it's all packed up and it looks like ready for the trunk of your car. Does it go into a bag?
Yeah, actually it does come in a bag, and everything that comes up with it comes with the kit fits in that bag. And I didn't have a photo of it in this presentation, but the bag is about, I don't know, it's about 30, maybe 36 inches wide, and it's about 24 inches tall. And the whole kit, I think on the 12-foot boat, is less than 50 pounds. It's like 47, 48 pounds. So it comes with a bag, it comes with a couple of oars, comes with 2 bench seats, comes with a pump, a repair kit, and a pad for one of the bench seats. And
could you put that on an aircraft as a piece of luggage?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the debate right now. Is I'm just like you, Marshall, leaving next week. I'm going down to fish in Mexico in June, and I'm gonna do some flats fishing, and I'm debating whether or not I want to check one of these things, because it's really, really easily portable. So, you know, if you want to DIY anywhere around the world, as long as you can check that bag and take it with you.
To another question from Tim, what do you recommend to avoid for hooks and fish puncture? Are these craft, I mean, we know about float tubes, but are the Scouts, are they more hook resistant?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'll tell you what, almost every trip I still bounce a fly off of my pontoons. And we did a little test. So this is like, it's 1100 denier PVC. It's extremely strong. It's extremely resilient. And actually, Josh Merrill, who I mentioned earlier, we did a video with Josh. He wasn't happy about it. We had him take an ice pick and puncture his boat. And the funny thing was, like with his, with his youthful 18-inch scrawny arms, he had to punch that thing like 3 times before he was able to get that thing to puncture. I'm not saying it won't happen, because you could drop a fish just right, but they're pretty hook and fin resistant. The other thing is too, is the way that this stuff works. Even if you puncture it with a hook, you could reasonably still be out on the water for a few hours and not be in any trouble. There was another video we shot one time where we had the boat literally half inflated. So only one of the pontoons was full. The Air4 was inflated. We had a 3.5 horsepower motor on the back, and it was still fine and dandy.
That's great. Hey, Graham, I think run on another slide, because I think we want to leave your info up on the screen, don't we? So people can
the next slide here. This is my contact info here. If you want to find out more information on fly fishing in the bay, or even if you're a conventional guy that's tuned in, you want to do that. I get a lot of guys that want to do that too. You can reach out to me directly. If you want more information on my program, you can also visit my website, which is there in my email. It's driftwoodcaravanoutdoors.com. And then my phone number's up there too. So I'm a social guy. You can text me, you can call me. I'm happy to get back to you with your questions on the boats. And the other thing I would tell you too, in terms of the boat, one of the benefits, and I open this up to everybody, because I'm a pro staff, if you're interested in one of the boats, I can get you a little better deal than what you'd pay online if you came through me directly. So I'm placing orders for people too, and I can help facilitate that. I can actually help you outfit your boat. So feel free to call me. And I can also connect you with other people who are doing the same thing. I have a couple of private groups that I manage on Facebook that are nothing but small craft owners. And some people who are attending today may already be part of those groups. But it's not just me sharing my experience. There's so many people who are now involved in this program that are having their own experience and sharing great information and great ideas on how to outfit your boat for whatever it is that you're doing.
Fantastic. Couple more questions here. Are you required to wear a PFD in local waters, or is it just common sense that you wear?
Well, if you're under 18, you definitely need to wear a PFD. And there's also a new regulation that talks about having a kill switch cord, and you need to have that attached to you at all times. We didn't go over that much, but typically, I'm not I'm a very strong swimmer. And I do keep, even though I'm not wearing my PFD in this photo, I do have the kill cord attached. If my motor's running, the kill cord is attached to my belt loop. So if I fall off the side, that motor stops, and I don't do that. But fishing offshore, a lot of times I will wear a PFD. You better believe I make my kids wear their PFD when they're out on these things. And yeah, it's just good common sense to at least have one handy. I've always got one on board. In fact, it's regulation. You have to. Don't have to wear it, but it's regulation that you have to have one.
Cool. Tim's also asking if you recommend a VHF radio if you're going further offshore.
Absolutely. Yep. Marine VHF radio, having access to that emergency channel is great. Even when I'm fishing inshore and I don't, have the VHF on me, sometimes like if we're fishing in the bay and it's me and another buddy, I'll get a couple of those. I have a bunch of those like really inexpensive Motorola family band radios, and we just keep in touch over those.
Okay, we've got another question you may or may not be able to answer. This is someone who has a fish cat, and I guess it's a pontoon boat, and the frame is heavy steel, and they want to know the single person dolly. Is there a single person dolly for getting these to?
Absolutely. There's actually several options, and Scout sells one, or you can buy it online. It's basically a collapsible piece of of square steel tubing, and it's got 2 sand tires on either side of it, and that makes it a lot easier. I mean, if you're launching close to the water, yeah, you can totally drag your boat. Like La Jolla, you can literally drive your car right onto the sand. But anything more than anything more than 10 feet or 20 feet, there's no reason not to have the sand trolley. and you can make one or you can buy one already made.
That's great. So if everyone has their screenshot of Graham's, they're taking their photograph of Graham's slide, which I discovered is the best way to get information these days. Let's move to the last slide, which is the Southwest Council slide, I think.
And yeah, I was going to say, if you guys enjoyed this program, if you've tuned into any of the other programs, you know, I highly recommend that that you make a donation. They suggest $5 or more to Fly Fishers International. You can do that by going to their website. There's a donate button right there on the bottom. They also take Venmo, but you know, it makes it so, you know, guys like me and guys like the folks like the other folks have a platform to share the information. They've got a lot of great programs, and like Marshall said in the beginning, you know, they've got great programs for kids, because, you know, kids are the future of this sport. And, you know, I was fortunate enough myself to grow up, you know, with my dad being an avid fisherman, but, you know, like, it's just one of the most wonderful things and one of the most wonderful resources that we have. And, you know, Marshall and Michael, who helped put this whole thing together, even Carl Crawford, who is he's the director of the children's program, doing a great job, putting a lot of heart and putting a lot of time into this. So, you know, if you consider it, yeah, you know, please go and make a donation so we can do more of this.
Hey, not to mention the chance to win the swag and the guided day and the whole thing. I mean, this is what, you know, fly fishermen are all about, is like swag and guided days. So I don't think I'm seeing any more questions here, Q&A. I want to just thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Marshall.
Presentation. It's really just a lot of information packed into that time, and good luck down in Mexico. If you wind up taking your boat in a bag, let me know. One thing I was going to ask you, I take it there's no kind of rental opportunities for these boats, right? There's no like rental. You can rent subs, I know that. But
yeah, you can rent subs, but yeah, so we've been doing this, like, you know, I've got a fleet of them, and essentially the way that it works is you'll never fish on the same boat as me, but, you know, when you come out with me, like, you know, like we can and contact me about this directly, but I do demo days every once in a while. And, you know, a couple times a year, there's typically one of the pro staff will do an event where we put these things out on the water, and, you know, there's an opportunity to come and take a look at it, because the Scout doesn't have showrooms. You know, they have us pro staff. So typically what happens is, if you want to see one, you get in touch with one of us pro staff. Great.
Thank you. And as a reminder, anyone, tell your friends about this. I think the videos, the recording of this is going to be up on the Southwest Council site at some point pretty soon. So thank you very much. And
thank you both. Thank you both for all your time. I wanted to pop back in here. This is the end of our series with, we've done 6 episodes since January. And I think after this, maybe we'll start doing them in person or something, because maybe we're past all this stuff. But we certainly appreciate everybody's participation, and for the panelists, and for Marshall putting up with this week after week after week at his high rate of pay. We'll be cutting him a check soon. All right. Graham, we thank you for closing out the series. It was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Okay, guys, thank you.
See you on the water.
See you on the water. Tight lines.